Welcome back to the deep dive. So we're taking that stack of sources you've shared, the articles, research, personal notes, and boiling it down, concentrated knowledge. Today, we're really plunging into something core. The dynamics of meaningful connections. We're talking about the language we use, how we talk about relationships, the actual effort it takes to keep them going, especially across distance. And also those, surprising challenges that pop up when cultural differences get mixed in. Our mission here is to pull out those key nuggets of insight, the stuff that shortcuts you to being really well informed on making those crucial relationships, family, friends, feel more real, more durable, just, more fulfilling. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, this is such a critical topic because relationships, they're fundamental to our well-being, right? Our psychological health. But we often treat them like they're just static, things that just are. And the sources we looked at make it super clear. Relationships are always evolving, always. And describing them, maintaining them, adapting them, that takes conscious effort. It takes specific language. And it really requires a pretty intense degree of empathy and cultural sensitivity. It's not enough to just have people in your life. You really have to actively nurture those bonds and, importantly, translate how you feel into actions that actually resonate with the other person.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me that the very foundation seems to start with just, the simple act of description, how we talk about people. We fall into this trap so easily, don't we? Using these bland general facts. Oh, she was a nice lady, or he's a good friend. I struggle with that myself sometimes. It tells you something, sure, but it loses the feeling, the essence.
It absolutely loses the emotional resonance, yeah. The core insight here really is moving beyond those generic facts. You have to capture the essence, the impression of a person. Like you said, if you tell me your grandmother was a nice lady, honestly, I forget that almost immediately. But if you talk about her infectious laughter, or the way she could just hold a room with her amazing stories, maybe even the specific smell of, the herbal tea she always brewed, suddenly I can start to visualize her. That specific detail, that's what brings a person to life, even when they're not there.
Right. And it makes the connection real for the listener, too, which is kind of the whole point when you're sharing something personal, isn't it? Yeah. The sources had that perfect example, using a story to capture detail. Yeah. That feels like the most powerful technique. So instead of just saying, factually, my childhood friend Sarah was adventurous, you actually tell the story. You recount the time you two climbed that, ridiculously tall tree in her backyard.
Exactly. And you add that crucial detail that it was the one tree her mom specifically said, do not touch that tree. That little act of transgression, like shared moment of risk, maybe a bit of adrenaline. That's what sticks. You're not just stating a trait, you're sharing an action that reveals character. You're showing the listener Sarah was daring, maybe a bit of a rule bender, and you were right there with her, her willing co-conspirator. That single story, it says so much more about your bond than throwing 100 adjectives at it.
Okay, so that works for actions, for adventure. But what about those deeper qualities, the abstract ones like kindness or integrity, supportiveness? Those are often the things we value most, but they feel harder to pin down, harder to describe concretely.
Yeah, they are harder. And this is where we have to really commit to that show don't tell strategy. Fully commit. The sources offer a really practical framework for this. Quantify the abstract quality. Show it with a specific action that actually costs the person something: time, effort, comfort. So instead of just saying someone is kind, you tell the story. The specific time a friend stayed up all night helping you fix that work presentation, right? Even though they had their own massive meeting the next morning.
Ah, okay. That immediately shows dedication, sacrifice. The cost is the key element there, isn't it? It reveals where their priorities actually lie in that moment.
It really is. Or take supportiveness. The source mentioned that friend, Mark, remember, who called or texted every single day during a really tough, drawn-out period at work. It wasn't some big one-off grand gesture. It was the sustained daily effort, just checking in, that persistence, that kind of daily investment of time and care. That defines his supportiveness way better than just saying, oh yeah, Mark was really supportive.
And it sounds like we also need to be deliberate about the language we use to frame these actions. It's not just telling the story, but the words we choose.
Precisely. Don't just say, he helped me. Use stronger phrasing, like the sources suggested. He went above and beyond to support me. Or when describing a parent's dedication, instead of just, my dad worked hard, try something more evocative. Like, my dad worked tirelessly to provide for our family. He always consciously put our needs before his own.
Worked tirelessly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. It captures the exhaustion, the sheer determination behind it. It really elevates the effort involved.
Right. And Ultimately, I think for any description to really land, to be engaging, you have to zero in on what genuinely resonates with you about that person. If you can't immediately put your finger on why you admire their loyalty or kindness, take a bit. What did it look like in a specific moment, maybe a crisis? That specificity, that genuine connection you feel, that's what lets the listener connect too, even if they've never met the person.
Okay, so if specific language helps us define the people we love, the next big challenge is facing the fact that those definitions and the relationships themselves, they're not static, they shift. So let's look at how we navigate that almost inevitability of bonds that fade. It happens to everyone, right? But it often comes with this feeling of guilt or maybe regret.
It really does. And that's why the strategy from the sources feels so helpful. Focus on the positive parts, the lessons learned, acknowledge the history, the connection you had, absolutely. But also, you kind of have to accept that people grow in different directions sometimes. You don't need to, erase the past just because the present looks different.
I really like that example of the college friend, the one who boosted your confidence, helped you come out of my shell, as the source put it. You might not talk anymore, maybe you've completely lost touch, but you can still look back and acknowledge the huge positive impact they had during that specific period of your life.
That perspective is so crucial because it lets you frame a relationship that's no longer active in a positive, appreciative way. And it leads right into that lovely analogy the sources shared, the one about relationships being like chapters in a book. Some chapters are long, some are short, maybe some end kind of abruptly, but they all contribute to your life story. It's okay, It's okay to accept that not every friendship is meant to be this lifelong, novel-length commitment.
Yeah, that analogy definitely helps take the sting out of it. It wasn't a failure. It was just a chapter that reached its natural end. Okay, but what about the chapters that haven't ended, but are seriously challenged by geography? Dealing with distance, like your sister's in Australia, maybe your brother's in Berlin. You can't just rely on bumping into each other anymore.
No, you absolutely can't. Distance puts a massive strain on any relationship, family, or friend. And the material really stresses this. It requires conscious, very intentional effort. It means you have to move beyond just wishing you were closer. You have to actively build that time into your schedule, whether that's setting up those regular weekly video calls or even just making those quick, intentional text messages happen. Not just, forwarding a funny meme, but a real brief check-in. Hey, thinking of you, how's it going? Those small, frequent touches. They're surprisingly essential for keeping that emotional thread alive, that feeling of continuity.
And this ties right into the whole changing landscape of adult friendship. Pretty much everyone listening can relate to this. Making really close friends gets way harder once you're out of those built-in structures like college or your first job.
Oh, it absolutely changes. When we're younger, proximity and shared context, school, dorms, internships, they do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, right? Friendships can almost happen accidentally. Later on, people are often, as the source said, more settled. They're focused on careers, maybe starting families. You lose that constant sort of institutionalized mingling that made forming friendships easier, and that scarcity, it forces a shift, a necessary one.
Right. That shift towards prioritizing quality over quantity. It stops being about just finding someone to go to the movies with. It becomes more about seeking out someone you can really confide in, someone who gets your complexities, who you can lean on when things actually get tough.
Exactly. And the sources really highlighted that one of the best ways to build and deepen those quality bonds is through shared activities, especially activities that introduce a bit of mutual vulnerability.
You're talking about the example of the host and his friend Mark, right? Learning to brew their own beer together. And it wasn't just a casual hobby. It was the shared failure that was key.
That's the magic ingredient, shared failure. The sources detailed that disaster phase. Remember the first batch? They forgot to sterilize something properly or didn't do it well enough. And it ended up this terrifyingly sour, infected mess they just had to pour down the drain. Hours of work, money spent, all for nothing. Spectacular failure. But crucially, they failed together.
Yeah, that shared vulnerability, that moment of, wow, we completely messed this up, this is awful, that creates much stronger bonds than just shared success who ever could, I think. It gives you something real to talk about, something beyond the usual, how was your day script.
Precisely. They went from that failure to eventually figuring it out, mastering the process. But the real bond, it was forged in that mutual embarrassment and the shared commitment to okay, let's try this again.
Yeah.
And the details in the source needing the big pot, the fermenters, the whole sterilization routine, it shows it wasn't just hanging out. It required real cooperation, sustained effort. It was a project. And tackling that project together solidified the friendship.
So Beyond shared activities, the sources also really drilled down on the foundational stuff, the practice of actually being a good friend. And right at the core of that seems to be something often overlooked, just being present.
Being present is absolutely an active choice. It means really listening when your friends talk, not just, waiting for your turn to jump in, or worse, half listening while scrolling through your phone. Active listening means showing you're engaged, maybe nodding, asking clarifying questions, offering those little reflective responses that show you actually absorbed what they said.
And sometimes being a good friend means resisting that urge to immediately jump in and fix everything, right? Like when someone's going through something awful, maybe they lost their job. Often what they need isn't a 5-point action plan. It's just simple, reliable presence.
That's so true. Just showing up, maybe with coffee, maybe offering to just go for a long walk where you don't even talk much, or even just sitting with them in comfortable silence. People often just want to feel heard, feel understood, without the pressure of finding an instant solution. That kind of sustained empathy, just being there, it's invaluable.
And ultimately, it comes down to reliability, doesn't it? Loyalty.
Yeah.
Being someone who shows up, someone who can be counted on whether things are great or absolutely terrible, that feels like the definition of real quality friendship, that unwavering commitment.
Okay, so let's pivot now to family dynamics. This is where expectations, and let's be honest, often the complexity, can really ramp up. Family relationships usually come with these preloaded roles and obligations that feel different, often heavier than friendships.
Right, and distance seems to make things even more complicated with family than with friends, because that sense of obligation, it sticks around. But the easy ways to connect just vanish. The sources mention how tough it is maintaining bonds when family is far-flung, like the brother in Berlin or that cousin Liam in Amsterdam.
You really can't rely on those accidental catch-ups anymore. It takes a huge amount of conscious effort, like really deliberate planning. The pragmatic advice from the sources is spot on. You literally have to consciously block out the time and book the ticket. You have to make it a priority. If you just wait for the perfect moment to visit or rely on spontaneity, you'll just keep postponing, and those relationships inevitably start to feel thin from neglect.
And when you do manage to connect, especially across generations, that intergenerational wisdom piece was highlighted as being really important, like grandparents' stories, whether it's about their childhood out in the countryside or their experiences during major historical events or just their accumulated life lessons. It's more than just entertainment, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Those stories connect us to something bigger than ourselves. They give us historical context, personal wisdom. They give the younger generation this really vital sense of belonging. Hearing those stories, that's how family traditions and values get passed down. It helps build a strong sense of identity, a connection to the family's whole narrative arc.
But even with that shared history, family roles themselves have to evolve. That example of the host's older sister still trying to give advice like their kids, that really illustrates how those childhood dynamics, the caregiver, the dependent one, can hang around really awkwardly into adulthood.
That's a classic challenge. The older sister might still genuinely see her role as guidance, right? But the younger sibling is now a capable adult, and it just creates friction. The sources say you have to consciously redefine those adult-sibling relationships. And that means having conversations, establishing new norms based on mutual respect, acknowledging each other's autonomy, maybe even setting some gentle boundaries around unsolicited advice. It has to be an active dialogue, not just hoping things will shift on their own.
And that whole idea of redefining family.
Yeah.
It leads us straight into the modern concept of chosen family, which came up quite a bit. The definition of family today feels so much broader than just blood ties.
Definitely. The sources really emphasize that today, for many people, family is defined more by deep connection and reliable mutual support than by biological links. Think about those university friends who become your rock, your unshakable support system through thick and thin. They absolutely meet the emotional definition of family because they provide that reliable structure of care and belonging.
That shift feels really crucial, especially when you layer in cultural expectations. The sources pointed out just how massive the variations can be in family expectations, depending on the culture.
Yeah, culture dictates so much, things like communication styles. Some families, culturally, are very high context, very open, sharing every little detail, which can sometimes feel overwhelming if you're not used to it. While other cultures, or even just other families within the same culture, might be naturally more reserved, they value privacy more, especially around personal struggles or finances.
And these cultural differences can play out really intensely when it comes to big life choices. I remember that personal story in the source about the parents who desperately wanted their child to become a doctor, a very respected, stable profession in their culture. But the child wanted to pursue writing, which the parents saw as precarious, maybe even a bit less honorable.
Exactly. That clash between perceived cultural duty and personal passion creates immense pressure. It's that tension between, say, the expectation to stay geographically close to home and family versus needing to move away for a career opportunity. The material suggested that while it can be a painful process, sometimes taking years, families can often learn to accept these differences, but it usually requires open communication, focusing on the child's happiness and fulfillment rather than just rigidly sticking to tradition.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. We're moving into the really practical, sometimes surprising challenges. Making friends, building trust when you're abroad. We can draw a lot here from the brothers' experiences adjusting to life in Berlin. This really gets us into those unspoken social rules, those moments where you suddenly go, aha, that's how it works here.
Those aha moments are so vital, aren't they? Because they remind us that social competence isn't innate, it's learned, it's culturally specific. And the sources started with a classic example, German directness.
Right. That must be quite a transition going from, say, polite, North American ambiguity, the soft no, to just blunt honesty. Someone simply saying, no, I don't want to, if they're not interested in an invitation. No long explanation, no apology.
And yeah, initially, that level of directness can definitely feel rude, maybe even cold, if you're not expecting it. But the sources explain the why behind it. In German culture, often that directness is seen as a sign of efficiency and even respect for your time. They're not trying to waste your time with polite excuses they don't mean, which they might see as potentially dishonest. They value clarity. Once you adjust, you actually start to appreciate it, the lack of guesswork, the absence of social maneuvering.
That's such a powerful reframing, seeing directness as respect, not rudeness.
Okay,
another great example was the barbecue faux pas.
Yes, the barbecue. So the brother, coming from a culture where bringing a bottle of wine as a guest gift is totally standard, he did exactly that. Makes sense, right? But the sources noted that at a casual German barbecue, the expectation is often different. It's more that guests contribute food to the meal, like a salad or a dessert, maybe some bread, something substantial that actually integrates into the event. The wine is nice, sure, it's a bonus, but contributing food, that's seen as being a helpful participant, part of the collective effort.
So the takeaway there is super simple, but crucial. Never assume. Just ask beforehand, hey, what can I bring to share?
Absolutely. Always ask. Then there was the greeting difference, which is subtle, right? Mostly nonverbal cues. The sources mentioned an American friend who really struggled initially. She was used to those enthusiastic American greetings, maybe an immediate hug, a quick-fire personal update. Oh my gosh, you won't believe what happened. But she had to adjust to the more reserved German approach, often just a polite handshake or a simple hello.
Yeah, she felt like she was being too intense. Like she was worried she was coming across as overwhelming because her normal level of friendliness, totally fine back home, was just culturally dissonant in this new context.
And that's such an important lesson. Even something as basic as friendliness is culturally defined. If you don't adjust your delivery, your genuine attempt to connect can actually backfire, push people away, because you're operating outside the local social norms, the unspoken contract.
Okay, so given all these potential pitfalls, how do you actually go about building a network? What was in the brothers' toolkit, so to speak, for making it work?
Well, first, it started with finding shared activities, things that minimize the need for perfect language skills right away. Joining a photography club, a running group. Those were key, because shared hobbies kind of bridge that language gap. The focus is on a mutual goal, something visual, like taking a great photo or just finishing the run. It allows conversation to happen more naturally, lets connections build a bit more slowly.
Okay, strategy 2 seemed to be about proactivity and patience. You have to put yourself out there. You join the clubs, go to community events, but, and this is critical, you have to balance that effort with patience. You can't force it.
Exactly. You can't expect deep, meaningful relationships overnight. Building real trust takes time, especially in cultures that might value a slower, more gradual progression in relationships compared to, say, the instant friendship vibes sometimes found elsewhere.
And maybe the most reassuring strategy, the one that made me feel a bit better, was leveraging mistakes. Using those awkward moments as bonding opportunities. That story about accidentally ordering a glass of vinegar instead of iced tea.
The vinegar incident. Yes, pure gold.
The sheer awkwardness must have been intense.
Profoundly awkward, I imagine. But that shared moment of confusion, right? Then the inevitable laughter and the story they all got out of it afterwards. It instantly bonded him with those new acquaintances. That silly, self-deprecating mistake showed he was human, he was trying. It allowed them to connect as people navigating a funny, mutual challenge, rather than just being on opposite sides of some invisible cultural fence.
He also smartly tapped into expat communities, didn't he? Both online forums and in-person groups. That seems like a crucial lifeline.
Definitely. That shared network provides immediate emotional support, people who get what you're going through. Plus, really practical advice during that often tough transition phase.
Okay, moving a bit deeper now into the complexities. Let's talk about navigating conflict or giving feedback across cultures, especially in cultures that really prioritize saving face. Direct constructive criticism there is often a huge no-no, right?
A huge no-no, because saving face is all about protecting someone's public dignity, their social standing, their reputation within the group. So direct criticism, especially in front of others, isn't just seen as feedback on performance. It can feel like an attack on their entire social self.
So it's about maintaining social harmony, mutual respect, above all else.
Exactly. It's about keeping the group dynamics smooth. So the required strategy is usually much gentler, more indirect, often called sandwiching the criticism. You put the negative point between two positive comments. Or you frame it as a suggestion, maybe for mutual improvement, rather than a direct critique. You might say something like, I really appreciated the effort you put into X. That was great. I was just wondering if maybe approach Y might also work well next time, perhaps because of Z. See how it focuses on the action, the process, not the person.
Wow, yeah. That takes tremendous self-awareness and control, doesn't it? Especially if you come from a culture that really values quick, direct, get-it-done problem solving.
It absolutely does. And finally, there are those small but really critical details, like gift receiving. The sources highlighted that difference in some Asian cultures, for example. The norm might be to wait until the giver has left before opening a gift. Whereas in the US, opening it right away, showing enthusiasm, is usually expected. Opening it later could seem ungrateful. But in the other context, opening it immediately might seem materialistic or overly eager.
It's fascinating how those tiny micro behaviors can instantly signal respect or disrespect, entirely depending on the local cultural script. Learning those little norms feels key to really fitting in, being accepted. Okay, this has been a fantastic look at navigating the external stuff, the cultural differences. Now let's bring it back home, more internally. How do we maintain relational health? The sources gave some really critical guidance on sustaining these bonds over the long haul, and importantly, how to handle conflict when it inevitably arises.
Right. And the first rule for longevity seems pretty clear. Prioritize the two-way street. Friendship has to be inherently balanced, right? If one person is constantly the one needing support, needing attention, asking for help, without ever really offering much back in return, well, that relationship stops being a bond and starts becoming a drain. True friendship needs that mutual respect, that mutual investment, and just mutual understanding. It's got to flow both ways.
We talked earlier about reliability being the bedrock. But the sources introduced something even more, maybe rigorous, the idea of valuing challenging friends. It's so easy to just surround yourself with people who always agree with you, who make you feel comfortable.
It is easy, but comfort doesn't always lead to growth, does it? Growth is often uncomfortable. And these challenging friends, the sources argue, are essential. They act like ethical mirrors for us. We need people in our lives who will push us to be better, who will, kindly but firmly, call us out on our blind spots or bad behavior, or challenge our assumptions, even when it's really uncomfortable to hear. That friction, provided it's grounded in genuine love and commitment to the relationship, that's what helps us evolve as people.
Okay, but what happens when that friction stops feeling constructive, when it turns genuinely negative? Like when a friend becomes consistently emotionally draining or maybe overly critical in a way that isn't helpful. How do you handle that while still protecting yourself, maintaining your boundaries?
Yeah, that's a tough one. This is where recognizing the signs of, let's call it relational fatigue, becomes important. And prioritizing your own mental health is key. The material suggests being assertive, not aggressive. If it's a long-standing relationship, you probably owe them an open, honest conversation first. Using assertive I statements helps. Something like, when you consistently rely on me for X support, I end up feeling emotionally drained. I really value our friendship, but I need us to find a boundary around that. Maybe we could limit those calls to once a week.
Right, so it's about articulating the effect their actions have on you and your well-being, rather than just launching into accusations like you're such a negative person.
Exactly. Focus on the behavior and its impact. And then if the behavior doesn't change after you've had that honest conversation, the sources are clear. It is okay and sometimes necessary to gradually create some distance. Protecting your own well-being isn't selfish. It's actually required for you to be healthy and functional in all your relationships.
Okay, another really common point of conflict, or at least internal struggle, the green-eyed monster. Jealousy or envy. It's so natural, isn't it, to feel that pang when a close friend gets that promotion you wanted or achieves something you've been striving for.
It is totally natural to feel it. The real work, the effort, lies in how you respond to that feeling. First and foremost, the source's stress, you absolutely must actively celebrate their success, genuinely. Then, internally, you have to consciously reframe that envy. Don't let it fester into resentment, into that why them and not me spiral. Instead, try to use it as positive motivation. Ask yourself, okay, what can I learn from their process? What steps did they take? What lessons about dedication or strategy can I apply to my own goals?
And what if the envy feels really overwhelming? Sometimes it can be hard to just reframe it away.
If it's truly overwhelming, the sources actually suggest that, counterintuitively perhaps, open communication can strengthen the bond, if the friendship is strong enough. Being vulnerable enough to say something like, hey, I am genuinely so incredibly happy for you about this, but I have to confess I'm also struggling with a bit of envy because, I wanted that outcome so much too. That kind of honesty, it can actually be a moment of really deep connection and trust.
Wow. Vulnerability like that really disarms the situation, doesn't it? Makes the feeling less toxic because it's out in the open. It turns that internal struggle into a shared truth, which could actually reinforce the friendship's foundation.
Exactly. And finally, we really have to touch on the elephant in the room for modern relationships. Social media. It's everywhere. So what does this pervasive tool actually mean for our relational health today?
Yeah, what's the verdict?
Well, the sources consistently describe it as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's an amazing tool, right, for keeping in touch with that sister in Australia or your cousin Liam in Amsterdam, like we talked about. It shrinks distance in incredible ways.
Yeah.
But it carries significant dangers, too.
The biggest one seems to be that false sense of connection. Thinking you're genuinely close to someone, that you know what's going on in their life, when actually you're only seeing their carefully curated highlight reel.
Precisely. And constantly seeing those highlight reels, it's just a breeding ground for comparison culture, for envy. It can make you feel perpetually inadequate about your own life. Plus, online interactions strip away all the crucial nonverbal cues. There's no tone of voice, no body language, no micro-expressions. That makes it incredibly easy to misinterpret someone's intention, leading to totally unnecessary conflicts and misunderstandings.
So the solution isn't to just ditch social media entirely, necessarily, but to be really intentional about how we use it.
Exactly. Intentionality is key. Social media should enhance our relationships, not replace the real work. It shouldn't detract from them. The sources strongly advocate for prioritizing face-to-face interaction whenever possible, actively scheduling those video calls where you can see expressions, and being really disciplined about disconnecting from the endless feed sometimes, just to focus fully on the people who are physically present in your life.
Okay, so the core message is digital communication can definitely support connection, but it's the real-life interaction, the presence, the effort that truly sustains it. We have to make sure we're using these tools to support genuine human connection, not as a cheap substitute for the sometimes difficult but ultimately rewarding labor of actually being present with each other.
Well said.
Wow. This has been a really comprehensive look, hasn't it? At all the effort required building, maintaining, adapting relationships in this world that feels increasingly marked by distance and, well, cultural complexity. We've covered so much. The power of using really specific language to capture someone's character. The absolute necessity of, booking that plane ticket to bridge physical distance and navigating those subtle but crucial cultural adjustments, everything from German directness to the nuances of leaving face.
Yeah, I think the overarching takeaway for you, the listener, is pretty clear. Whether you're navigating complex family expectations, maybe trying to redefine those long-standing sibling roles into something more adult, or you're trying to make friends in a completely new country. That ability to really observe, to adapt your style, and to communicate with genuine empathy and respect for all these varying cultural and personal norms. That seems to be the non-negotiable foundation for any lasting, meaningful connection.
It really makes you rethink your own social map, doesn't it? And thinking about the future, given this rise of chosen family that we talked about, and the huge spectrum of cultural expectations around closeness and duty, it makes me wonder, how will future generations ultimately define their obligations, morally, maybe financially, emotionally to their biological relatives versus these self-selected support systems they build. That's definitely something powerful to mull over this week.
Indeed it is. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll catch you next time. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you were with us last time, we spent a fantastic deep dive exploring, the best parts of close relationships, the shared history, the unwavering support systems, and the beautiful cultural threads that make those bonds unique.
Yeah, we were definitely in the celebration phase.
We really were savoring the richness of connection.
And that shared history, that support, it is everything. But if we're going to understand the true strength of a relationship, we have to recognize that, the good moments aren't what define its longevity. The true measure of resilience is what happens when things get rough.
Exactly. Every close relationship, whether it's with a partner, family member, or close friend, is going to hit friction. It just is.
It's inevitable.
Conflict isn't a sign of failure. It's actually a sign of engagement. And that means today we're shifting from celebration to necessary maintenance. Our mission is to navigate the inevitable bumps in the road, exploring the practical tools of conflict resolution, the power of defining boundaries, and, the surprising architecture of a genuine apology.
It's a crucial shift, I think. Think of a deep, committed relationship not as like a static painting, but as a living, complex structure.
Okay.
If you skip the necessary maintenance, those difficult conversations, you're basically allowing corrosive elements like passive resentment and unaddressed hurt to just eat away at the foundation.
Right.
We are diving into the user manual for sustainable connection, essentially.
Okay, let's unpack this with the first and probably most common reaction to friction. Avoidance.
Yeah.
When tension flares, that natural fight-or-flight instinct often translates into freezing or fleeing. We all know people who are so, terrified of confrontation that they'll actively go silent, ignore messages, and avoid the person entirely for weeks.
That primal desire to avoid pain is strong. Avoidance is a strategy of immediate relief, right?
Right.
You successfully sidestep the, say, 10 minutes of uncomfortable tension right now, but you pay a massive hidden cost down the road.
How so?
Well, the issue here is that the conflict doesn't just vanish, it simply becomes internalized.
Okay, I think we need to talk about that internal cost.
Yeah.
Because it's profound. We often frame avoidance as being passive. But in reality, it's a form of, passive aggression that takes enormous cognitive energy.
That's a great point.
You aren't resolving the issue. You're bottling it up, putting it on the shelf, and kind of checking on it every day.
That's a perfect way to put it. We call that rumination, constantly mentally chewing over the offense, rehearsing hypothetical arguments in your head, and really solidifying that narrative of resentment.
Ugh, yeah.
So if you're avoiding a 5-minute conversation, you might instead spend like 50 hours of mental energy just stewing over it.
Wow.
That resentment festers, leading to what psychologists call emotional flooding during the eventual explosion.
Flooding is the perfect term. You're so emotionally saturated by the buildup that when the dam finally breaks, the fight is no longer about the original slight, whatever it was.
No, absolutely not.
It's carrying the weight of all those weeks or months of unaddressed grievances. The reaction feels totally disproportionate, destructive, and often involves things being said that, you can't really take back.
Precisely. The goal then has to be shifting our belief system.
Yeah.
We must internalize that the temporary discomfort of addressing an issue directly is exponentially less damaging than the long-term cognitive and emotional cost of avoidance.
So facing it head on is actually kinder in the long run.
To the relationship, yes. When you choose to address it, you're prioritizing the health of the bond over your own short-term comfort.
I'll admit, the discipline required to choose that direct path is substantial. I had a small moment of truth recently thinking about my friend Mark, the one I brew beer with.
Oh, okay.
We'd had a miscommunication about a joint plan we had to execute, and he essentially bailed on me last minute. I felt completely disrespected.
Oh, I can imagine.
That hot flash of anger hit, and my instant emotional brain was just screaming, send the angry, accusatory text, use all caps, tell him exactly what you think.
That impulse is the emotional brain taking over, yeah. Demanding immediate release, demanding justice. But you managed to step back. What was the mechanism you used to override that impulse?
Well, I used two mechanisms, really. First, the physical separation. I literally put the phone down and walked away,
Smart.
giving the initial surge of adrenaline time to dissipate. This prevents the emotional flooding from dictating the message.
Right.
Second, I asked myself, what is the desired outcome here? Was the outcome to punish Mark, Or was the outcome to preserve the friendship and understand what happened?
That's the key question.
When the goal is preservation, the method has to change.
That waiting period, that space between stimulus and response, is everything. It moves you from a spontaneous, destructive reaction driven by the limbic system to a deliberate, constructive choice driven by the prefrontal cortex.
The thinking part of the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the discipline required to make the next section possible.
Okay, so that moment of discipline leads us directly into the core technique of deliberate communication, which is all about how we frame the conversation. We need to shift from impulsive reaction, where we attack the person.
Which is so easy to do.
Oh, totally. Shift from that to structured, intentional communication, where we attack the problem instead.
This is where the distinction between you did statements and I feel statements becomes absolutely crucial. When you begin a sentence with you are, or you always, or you never, you are essentially making an objective judgment about the other person's character or behavior.
Which immediately triggers their defense system, right?
Yeah.
It's like a perceived threat.
Exactly. When a person feels attacked, their nervous system registers a threat, and they neurologically enter defensive mode. They literally stop hearing the content of your complaint and start formulating counter-arguments, justifications, or maybe even their own list of grievances against you.
So you've lost before you've even started.
You've lost the possibility of resolution the moment you trigger that defensive response.
Yeah. So return to the Mark example. If I had sent that reactionary text, it would have been something like, you bailed on me and you clearly don't respect my time. Very accusatory.
Yep. Classic you statement.
Instead, the next day, after cooling down, I kept it personal and focused on my own experience. Hey, I felt really let down yesterday when the plans fell through, and I was confused about what happened. Could we take 5 minutes to talk about it?
That framing works because it shifts the focus from blame to experience. You're utilizing the foundational principle of nonviolent communication, NVC, whether you realized it or not.
How so?
Observation, feeling, need, request. You observe the change in plans. You stated your feeling, let down, confused. The implied need is respect for time or clarity, and the request is simply to talk. It's clean.
But here's the challenge, and this is a common trap I think you might fall into. What if the person hears I feel statements as like passive aggression or overly rehearsed therapy speak? How do we ensure the sincerity actually lands?
That's a critical point because insincere phrasing can backfire, definitely. Sincerity comes from connecting the feeling to a specific observable action, not a judgment.
Okay, give an example.
If you say, I feel like you're being a jerk, that's not really an I feel statement. That's a judgment wrapped in a feeling statement.
Got it.
A genuine I feel statement describes your internal emotional state, frustrated, sad, disappointed, confused, and links it cleanly to the action that occurred, like you did. When the plans fell through action, I felt let down feeling.
So the core lesson holds true. Attack the problem, not the person.
Yeah.
If you express your experience honestly, without launching, an ad hominem attack.
You invite collaboration. You establish immediately that you are both on the same team navigating an issue rather than opponents fighting for supremacy.
Right. The goal isn't to win. The goal is mutual understanding and repair.
Exactly. And when you approach it this way, you create the safe space necessary for the other person to be honest without fear of reprisal.
And the result, as in the case with Mark, was astonishingly quick resolution. I mean, really quick. By opening the conversation respectfully, he immediately felt safe enough to share his valid perspective. Turns out there was a family emergency I hadn't known about. And the conflict just evaporated in under 5 minutes. Seriously, if I had sent that angry text, the defensiveness would have masked his genuine situation, forcing a huge fight that was entirely unnecessary.
The efficiency of respectful communication is a powerful selling point, isn't it? We're often conditioned to believe conflict must be painful and long.
Yeah, drawn out.
But when you target the specific issue with emotional precision, resolutions can be rapid, saving weeks of emotional fallout.
The successful resolution with Mark also hinged on respecting boundaries, both my boundary around my time and, well, his boundary around his private life.
Definitely.
Because statistically, conflict rarely comes out of nowhere. It usually signals that a boundary has been violated or maybe was never clearly established in the first place.
Absolutely. And we should probably clarify what a boundary actually is. It's not a wall built to keep people out. It's more like a property line built to preserve your internal resources, your energy, your time, your emotional capacity.
Okay.
We typically categorize them into material, physical, time, and emotional boundaries.
And the place where boundary crossing seems most insidious and complex is often within family dynamics, right? Like especially when it comes to unsolicited advice.
Oh, yes. The unsolicited advice trap.
Family members often feel entitled to weigh in on your major life choices, career, finances, love life, because they feel that intrinsic connection grants them a kind of free pass.
That feeling of entitlement is often linked to the psychological concept of enmeshment, where the lines between individual autonomy and family identity get really blurry.
Enmeshment, okay.
Relatives, especially parents maybe, may struggle to see you as a separate, fully autonomous adult, viewing your decisions as somehow a reflection of their success or failure.
Ah, yes. My aunt, the self-proclaimed queen of helpful suggestions, is a perfect example. I know the intentions are good, it really comes from a place of care, but constantly having to defend my freelance career choice or my relationship status to her is just an enormous drain on my emotional labor.
It is draining precisely because the advice is often wrapped in affection. I'm only telling you this because I love you.
Exactly.
It puts you in a moral bind. Reject the advice, and you risk appearing to reject their love. But allowing the advice to stand violates your autonomy and forces you to constantly justify deeply personal decisions.
So how do we handle this delicate dance of enforcement? We need to be firm in protecting our emotional space, yet, diplomatic enough not to ignite a permanent family feud.
The primary strategy is acknowledging their input while simultaneously reinforcing your personal control. You want to validate their concern, but instantly and diplomatically terminate the trajectory of the conversation. Meaning, do not engage in a debate about the merits of your choice.
Okay, give us the specific scripts for the listener, because having the words prepared is half the battle, I find.
Certainly. So, if they offer advice on your job instead of arguing, try something like, I genuinely appreciate you sharing your worry, but I've looked at all the angles and I've got this handled.
Okay. Direct but polite.
Or for a softer, maybe stalling tactic. That's an interesting perspective. I'll definitely think about it when I review my options.
The classic, I'll think about it.
Critically, neither of those phrases invites follow-up questions or requires you to explain your plan. You've taken the input and signaled, essentially, this is filed and the decision rests with me.
That is powerful because it's a non-confrontational power move. It's polite, I hear you, and the conversation on this topic is now over. It subtly reinforces, this is my decision, without attacking their right to hold an opinion.
And remember, boundaries are not a one-time conversation. They are a consistent practice. You are effectively teaching people how you expect to be treated.
So consistency is key.
If you enforce the boundary 9 times out of 10, that 10th time you let it slide creates ambiguity. You must be consistent, respectful, and firm every single time until the behavior adjusts.
And we should emphasize that boundaries aren't just for those huge life-altering decisions.
Right, not at all.
They apply to the small things too. That friend who is always 30 minutes late, forcing you to rearrange your entire morning schedule, or the one who constantly expects you to front the bill or loan them money.
Exactly. Small boundary crossings, if ignored, slowly erode the sense of reliability and trust, just as surely as the big ones do.
So defending the small stuff matters.
The consistency in defending your small boundaries builds the resilience needed to defend your core emotional boundaries later. It trains the people around you to respect your time and resources as much as you respect theirs.
Now, when we talk about how people communicate, or often miscommunicate, we have to address the massive differences in communication styles that exist between generations.
Oh, definitely.
The way we talk to peers is fundamentally different from how we engage with parents or grandparents. And that difference is a perpetual source of avoidable conflict.
Technology has certainly amplified this, hasn't it? We often talk about surface-level issues like digital etiquette.
Right, like the texting styles.
But the underlying issue is often a clash of communication cultures. We see older generations sometimes operating in what we call a high context culture, where much of the meaning is derived from shared history, tone, and what is unsaid.
Yeah.
Younger generations often operate in a more low context digital culture, demanding explicit, direct, and fast communication.
And this manifests in the tools they use. I know I joked about my dad sending a text that reads like a formal 3-paragraph email with a subject line,
Chuckles lightly.
Yeah.
or my mother only using caps lock, making it seem like urgent shouting. But those aren't just quirks. They reflect deeper struggles with digital literacy and establish norms from their time.
Exactly. For our parents, communication was primarily synchronous and physical face-to-face, or maybe a formal phone call. Texting and email introduced asynchronous communication, where there's a delay. When they don't get an immediate response, the older generation might interpret that delay as intentional snubbing, rather than simply you being busy. And conversely, they might write in a formal style that we perceive as cold or aggressive when it's just their norm.
But the conflict runs deeper than just formatting, doesn't it? There's often a profound clash of core values driven by economic and historical context.
This is the crux of the misunderstanding, I think. Consider the traditional values that shaped our parents' generation, particularly those who came of age during periods of economic instability. Stability was often a non-negotiable virtue.
Makes sense.
The primary goal was often to secure a stable job, stay there for 30 or 40 years, ensure a pension, and prioritize security above almost everything else.
That provided immense safety. But for many modern professionals, especially the younger generation, security is maybe less of a driving force than autonomy and fulfillment. We are often willing to trade long-term security for meaningful work, flexibility, and seeking a passion, even if that means shifting careers every few years, freelancing, or working in highly unstable, nascent industries.
And this is where the perception gap truly manifests itself. When an older relative sees you choosing a freelance career, like the brother's example you mentioned, they aren't necessarily seeing opportunity. They are seeing unnecessary risk, instability, and potentially irresponsibility.
Because that's not what safe looked like for them.
Exactly. Their caution stems from their lived experience where a lack of institutional stability might have resulted in real hardship.
And in return, we often commit the fundamental attribution error. We look at their caution and assume it's a fixed flaw in their personality, that they are just rigid or unadventurous or stiflingly conservative.
Yeah, we judge the person, not the context.
We fail to attribute their caution to the external historical pressures that molded their worldview.
The path toward understanding, then, must be rooted in empathy and historical perspective. We have to actively try to understand the economic environment, the anxieties, and the life lessons that shaped their views on money, stability, and career.
We don't have to agree with them.
No, not at all. We don't have to adopt their views, but we must respect the wisdom, or at least the experience that created them.
The goal isn't conversion. It's recognizing that their expression of concern, whether delivered in a formal email text or via unsolicited advice, is usually their clumsy way of looking out for us, driven by genuine, albeit sometimes outdated, affection.
Absolutely. Acknowledging that good intention can diffuse a huge amount of friction.
It allows you to maintain your autonomy while preserving the relationship. You can say something like, I know you're coming from a place of care and I hear your experience, but I need to approach this differently for myself.
That's the common ground. Respecting their perspective while holding your own.
Okay, so we've covered prevention and management, but when conflicts inevitably breach the boundaries, the ultimate tool for relationship repair is the apology. A genuine apology is often more restorative than the conflict was destructive, I find.
It's the highest form of relational accountability, really. But unfortunately, the skill of offering a good apology is surprisingly rare.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, most people default to apologies that are either manipulative or self-protective, which, far from repairing the damage, simply deepen the rift.
Let's define a terrible apology, because we have all been subject to them. They usually come with hedging language, right?
Absolutely. The toxic apology attempts to shift blame or minimize the offense. Any phrase starting with, I'm sorry if you were offended, is immediately disqualified.
Why the if?
That if clause puts the burden of responsibility back on the recipient for being too sensitive or misinterpreting your intent. It removes your accountability entirely.
Gotcha. And the other major offender is the conditional apology. I'm sorry, but you also did this.
Ugh, yes, the sorry, but.
That is not an apology. That is an attempt to deflect and justify your behavior by bringing up the recipient's past failures. It avoids taking ownership entirely.
A genuine apology must be free of excuses and justification. It's an exercise in humility and honesty. We can actually break down the anatomy of a truly effective apology into 3 psychological components that must be present to signal authenticity and commitment to change.
Okay, walk us through those 3 necessary parts.
First, you must take full ownership of the action. This means acknowledging precisely what you did without minimizing the act. It's the difference between saying, I'm sorry I upset you, and saying, I'm sorry for breaking my promise to you and not showing up when I said I would.
Be specific.
You must name the specific harm done.
Okay, naming the specific harm validates the other person's experience. That covers the action. What about the emotion involved?
Second, you must demonstrate understanding of the impact. This is the empathy phase. You must articulate that you recognize the effect of your actions on the other person. Something like, I understand that my action caused you stress and disappointment, and that must have felt like a lack of respect.
Showing you get it from their side.
This shows the recipient that you cared enough to consider their perspective. It moves beyond expressing mere regret, which is just sadness over the outcome, to demonstrating true remorse, which is guilt over the action itself.
That distinction between regret and remorse is powerful. Regret is about how I feel about the situation. Remorse is about how you feel because of my action. That's key.
Precisely.
And the third component.
The third is the commitment to change and repair. An apology isn't just about what happened, it's crucially about the future. You need to commit to learning and growth by stating something like, I will actively try to do better in the future by setting specific reminders, or next time I will ensure I communicate much sooner if something comes up.
So it's not just words.
Exactly. This signals that the apology is not just a verbal salve to end the argument, but a genuine commitment to altering behavior.
Okay, so when you combine ownership, empathetic validation, and commitment, you send a clear message. I value this relationship far more than I value my own pride or my need to be right.
Yes. That humility is what makes the apology so profoundly restorative and trust-building. And that leads us to the final and often most difficult stage of conflict resolution, forgiveness. For the person who has been hurt, especially when the impact was deep, letting go of that lingering pain, even after a great apology, can be incredibly challenging.
It feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? We often cling to anger because it feels like a justified response. There's this worry that if we forgive, we are somehow letting the other person off the hook for their transgression and thus minimizing the hurt they caused.
That is the crucial misconception we must address. Forgiveness is fundamentally not about absolving the other person of responsibility. The powerful, almost radical insight here is that forgiveness is primarily an act of self-interest.
Self-interest, how so?
It is about freeing yourself from the psychological burden of carrying that anger and resentment.
Okay, explain that. If we look at it through the lens of cognitive load, holding a grudge means you are dedicating internal resources, your mental space, your emotional energy, to reliving the offense and rehearsing the anger over and over.
Precisely. You are essentially allowing the person who hurt you to continue to occupy and consume resources in your life long after the event is over. They're living rent-free in your head, as the saying goes.
Right.
Forgiveness is a form of emotional emancipation. It's an internal calculation you make to prioritize your own mental and emotional well-being over the perceived satisfaction of holding onto a righteous grudge. You choose personal peace over lingering resentment.
But we need to clarify the boundaries of forgiveness because this is where people get caught in the trap of thinking they must just forget it and return to the status quo.
Absolutely critical point. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting what happened. Forgetting would be unwise, actually. Remembering is vital for learning and self-protection.
Okay, so remember, but forgive.
That's a necessary distinction. You can forgive someone internally for the pain they caused, freeing yourself from the bitterness, while simultaneously recognizing that the trust may have been permanently damaged or needs serious rebuilding. This is the difference between forgiving the person and trusting the person again.
Oh, okay.
Trust is earned through consistent behavior over time. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, potentially immediately, to stop the bleeding.
And crucially, it doesn't mean you must let that person back into your life in the same way, does it?
Not at all. Forgiveness allows you to move on internally, perhaps by establishing a firmer, safer boundary with that person, or even by choosing to distance yourself entirely while still releasing the anger tied to the past event. You sever the painful emotional cord.
So it's a conscious choice to disarm the power the event holds over you.
Exactly. It's the ultimate act of self-care because you are reclaiming your narrative and your emotional autonomy. You are deciding when the chapter of resentment ends, regardless of what the person who hurt you does next. #outro.
Wow. This has been a necessary, I think, deep exploration into the mechanics of lasting relationships. If we synthesize all the concepts we've covered today, the discipline of conflict resolution, the clarity of boundary setting, the accountability of a genuine apology, and the self-emancipation of forgiveness, they all seem to fall under one essential umbrella: continuous relational maintenance.
The maintenance analogy really holds true, doesn't it? Relationships are complex systems, living things, and we cannot simply expect them to run perfectly forever without consistent investment.
Yeah, like a car needing tune-ups.
Exactly. They need regular checkups, recalibration of boundaries when needed, and structural repairs when conflicts inevitably occur. And the deeper the connection, the more vital this intentional, consistent maintenance becomes.
It's not a one-time checklist. It's a daily, continuous effort to invest in the people who matter most to you. Understanding that the willingness to navigate the difficult moments is actually the work that makes these bonds resilient, profound, and deeply meaningful in the long run.
And remember, the health of the relationship is often a direct reflection of the effort invested in addressing, rather than avoiding, the inevitable friction. Avoiding it just kicks the can down the road.
Well, thank you for guiding us through this critical, sometimes challenging, but ultimately empowering landscape. We really hope this deep dive provides you, the listener, with some concrete tools necessary for handling the inevitable bumps in your own relationships.
And as you reflect on the insights we've uncovered today, maybe take a moment to consider this final provocative thought, building on the source material. Think about one significant relationship in your life right now. Which form of maintenance setting a specific enforceable boundary, initiating an "I feel" statement to address a lingering issue, or making the conscious choice to offer or accept forgiveness, is the most urgent priority for keeping that bond strong and healthy right now?
Choose the maintenance that serves you and your relationship best. Until next time on The Deep Dive.